The woman clutching the tattered carpet bag had walked 3 days through Colorado mountain passes with shoes so worn that her toes touched dirt, and when she finally stumbled into Canon City in the summer of 1878, she owned nothing in this world that hadn't already belonged to someone else first. Ophelia Carson's dress had been her mother's before consumption took her, then her aunt's before she married West, then finally hers when there was no one left to pass it to. The thin shawl across her shoulders had holes from a previous owner's carelessness with candle wax. Even the few coins in her pocket were worn smooth by countless hands before hers. At 22 years old, she had never known what it felt like to possess something made just for her, something that didn't carry the weight of someone else's history. She collapsed against the wooden post outside the general store, her legs trembling from exhaustion and hunger. The main street of Canon City stretched before her, dusty and alive with afternoon activity. Wagons rolled past, their wheels kicking up clouds that made her cough. Men in wide-brimmed hats conducted business on wooden sidewalks, while women in bonnets hurried between shops. The Rocky Mountains rose like sentinels in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. "You planning to die there, or you just resting?" a voice asked. Ophelia forced her eyes open to find a stout woman in a clean apron, studying her with a mixture of concern and suspicion. The woman's gray hair was pulled back severely, and her hands rested on substantial hips. "Resting, madam," Ophelia managed, though even speaking took effort. "I'm looking for work, any kind of work." The woman's expression softened slightly. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, some berries I found along the trail." "Lord have mercy." The woman glanced up and down the street, then sighed. "I'm Dorothy Brennan. My husband and I run the boarding house 2 streets over. I can't promise permanent work, but I need help with laundry and cooking. Room and board, plus a small wage. You'll work hard for it, though." Ophelia's throat tightened with relief. "Thank you. I'll work as hard as you need, I promise." "Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. My mother taught me before she passed." "Well then, let's get some food in you before you collapse entirely. Can't have you fainting in the street. Bad for business." Dorothy held out a weathered hand, pulling Ophelia to her feet with surprising strength. "What's your name, girl?" "Ophelia Carson." "Where are you coming from?" "Ophelia Carson?" "Kansas. My aunt passed 2 months ago. The landlord took everything for back rent. There was nothing left for me there." Dorothy made a sympathetic sound as they walked down the street. "Colorado's full of people starting over. You're in good company." The boarding house was a 2-story structure with peeling paint but clean windows. Inside smelled of bread and lye soap. Dorothy led Ophelia to the kitchen and pressed her into a chair before ladling stew from a pot on the stove. The first bite nearly made Ophelia weep. Actual meat, potatoes, carrots, all swimming in rich gravy. She forced herself to eat slowly despite her body's demands to devour everything. "We've got 7 boarders right now," Dorothy explained, moving around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. "Mostly men working the railroad or in the quarries. They expect 3 meals a day and clean sheets once a week. My daughter usually helps, but she just had her 3rd baby and needs to stay home with the little ones for a spell. That's where you come in." "I won't let you down," Ophelia said between bites. "See that you don't. I'm fair, but I don't tolerate laziness or theft. You'll share a room in the attic with our hired girl, Mary. She does most of the heavy cleaning. You'll handle cooking and laundry primarily, help with serving meals. We start at 5 in the morning." Ophelia nodded, not caring about the early hours or hard work. She had a place to sleep and food to eat. After 3 days of walking with nothing but fear and uncertainty, this felt like salvation. She settled into the rhythm of boarding house life with desperate determination. Every morning before dawn, she stoked the stove and started breakfast for 9 people. After breakfast came laundry, hauling water, and scrubbing clothes until her hands were raw. Then preparing lunch, then dinner, then cleaning the kitchen while Mary swept and dusted the common areas. She fell into bed each night, too exhausted to dream. The boarders were mostly decent men who nodded politely and ate their meals without complaint. One of them, a railroad supervisor named Mr. Patterson, always thanked her for the food. Another, a quarry worker called Tom, had kind eyes but kept to himself. They treated her with distant respect, and she was grateful for their indifference. After the chaos of losing everything in Kansas, anonymity felt like a gift. 3 weeks into her employment, Dorothy mentioned the mountain man. Xerxes Sullivan came down yesterday, she told Ophelia while they kneaded bread dough in the kitchen. He'll be back tomorrow for supplies. He always stops here for a hot meal when he's in town. Is he another boarder? Ophelia asked, punching down her portion of dough. No, he lives up in the mountains. Traps mostly, some hunting. Comes to town maybe once a month to trade pelts and buy what he can't make himself. He's been living up there alone for near about 5 years now. Dorothy's voice carried a note of something between pity and admiration. Good man, that one. Quiet but decent. Lost his family in a fire back in Missouri. Couldn't stand to be around people after that. Ophelia felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to lose everything, to be hollowed out by grief. That's terrible. He's made peace with it, I think, or as much peace as a person can make. He'll sit in the corner, eat whatever you put in front of him, and won't say more than 10 words the whole time. Don't take it personal. That's just his way. The next day, Ophelia was serving lunch when the door opened and a man had to duck slightly to enter the boarding house dining room. He was the largest human being she had ever seen, not in the soft way of someone who ate too much, but in the way of solid muscle and bone built for hard mountain living. His shoulders seemed to fill the doorway. Dark hair fell past his collar, streaked with sunlight and browns and tied back with a leather cord. His beard was neat but full, and his clothes were buckskin and homespun that showed the wear of constant use. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a startling blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they carried a weight that spoke of old sorrows carefully locked away. He moved to the corner table without a word, setting down a pack that looked heavy enough to break most men's backs. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who worked with them constantly. Ophelia approached with her serving tray, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been with any of the other boarders. Good afternoon. We have beef stew and cornbread today, and apple pie for dessert. He looked up at her, and she saw surprise flicker across his features, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. He had probably been expecting Dorothy or Mary. That sounds fine, madam, he said. His voice was deep and rough from disuse, like rocks tumbling in a stream. She brought him a generous portion, noting how he nodded his thanks but didn't meet her eyes again. He ate with the focused attention of someone who didn't take food for granted, cleaning his plate thoroughly. When she brought the pie, he paused. This is extra, he said, not quite a question. Everyone gets dessert, she replied, though in truth she had cut his slice larger than the others. Something about him called to the part of her that understood hunger and loneliness. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Appreciated. He left shortly after, shouldering his pack with ease and nodding to Dorothy on his way out. Through the window, Ophelia watched him walk toward the general store, noting how people gave him respectful distance. Not from fear, she thought, but from an understanding that he preferred his space. That's Xerxes Sullivan, Dorothy confirmed, coming to stand beside her. Don't let his size fool you. He's gentle as a lamb unless someone threatens what's his. Then he's a grizzly bear. He seems lonely, Ophelia said softly. I expect he is, but that's the life he chose after the fire. Can't fault a man for how he deals with grief. Dorothy turned back to the kitchen. Come on, we've got dishes to wash and bread to start for tomorrow. The days rolled into weeks, and summer deepened into its full heat. Ophelia's hands grew calloused from work, and her body adjusted to the long hours. She saved every penny of her wages in a small tin she kept under her mattress. Sometimes she took it out at night and counted the coins by candlelight, marveling that this money was truly hers, earned by her own labor. Xerxes Sullivan came to town again in late August. This time Ophelia was ready for him, had made extra stew and baked fresh bread that morning. He took his usual corner table, and she brought his meal without being asked. Smells good, he offered, and she took it as the compliment it was. Thank you. The bread's fresh this morning. He nodded and began eating. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. You're new, since July. She turned back, surprised he had noticed or cared enough to mention it. Yes, sir. I came from Kansas. Long journey. Yes, it was. He studied her for a moment with those storm cloud eyes, and she had the unsettling feeling that he saw more than she wanted to reveal. But all he said was, Colorado's a good place for starting over. That's what Mrs. Brennan said. He returned to his meal, and she knew the conversation was over, but something had shifted. Some small acknowledgement had passed between them. Two people who understood loss and new beginnings. September brought cooler temperatures and golden aspens on the mountainsides. Ophelia had been in Canon City for 3 months, and the boarding house felt almost like home. She had proven herself reliable, and Dorothy had increased her wages slightly. The tin under her mattress grew heavier. When Xerxes came to town in mid-September, he brought fresh killed venison and traded it to Dorothy for credit. Ophelia was in the kitchen preparing vegetables when he appeared in the doorway, startling her. "Sorry, madam," he said quickly. "Didn't mean to scare you. Mrs. Brennan said you might could use this for the stew." He held out a cloth-wrapped bundle. "The venison? That's very generous." She took the bundle, their fingers briefly touching. His hands were warm despite the cooling weather. "You cook it well. Seems right to provide the meat for it." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the extended conversation. "I should go." "Wait," Ophelia said, surprising herself. "Would you like coffee? Fresh pot just finished." He hesitated, clearly warring with himself. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. She poured 2 cups and handed him one. They stood in the kitchen, the silence stretching but not quite uncomfortable. Outside, they could hear the normal sounds of the boarding house, footsteps overhead, Dorothy's voice directing Mary about something. "How long have you been in the mountains?" Ophelia asked. 5 years, since '73. His hands wrapped around the coffee cup, dwarfing it. "Mrs. Brennan mentioned you live alone up there." "That's right. Got a cabin about 15 miles northwest, up past the tree line. Good trapping territory." "Don't you get lonely?" The question hung between them. He took a long drink of coffee before answering. "Lonely's better than some alternatives." She understood that in her bones. Hadn't she felt the same way in Kansas after her aunt died, preferring solitude to the pity in people's eyes? "I know what you mean," she said quietly. His eyes met hers, and she saw recognition there, understanding. They were both survivors, both people who had learned to live with absence. "You've got loss in your eyes," he said bluntly. "Not my business what kind, but I recognize it. My mother died when I was 17. My aunt raised me, but she passed in June. There was nothing left, so I came here." The words came easier than she expected. "You got family anywhere?" "No, everyone's gone." He nodded slowly. "Me too. Fire took my wife and daughter, 5 years ago this October." "I'm so sorry." It was a long time ago, but the way he said it suggested no amount of time could make it truly past tense. They finished their coffee in silence, but it was the companionable quiet of two people who understood each other's wounds. When he left, he paused at the door. "Your cooking's the best I've had in years. Wanted you to know that." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan." "Xerxes, just Xerxes. Ophelia." He nodded and was gone, but something had changed between them. Some wall had developed a crack. October arrived with frost on the windows and smoke from chimneys. The boarders wanted heartier meals, and Ophelia learned to make thick stews and meat pies that stuck to their ribs. Her tin of savings had grown substantial. Sometimes she counted the coins and imagined what she might buy. A new dress, maybe. Something that had never belonged to anyone else. But she never quite worked up the courage to spend it. The money felt like security, like proof that she wouldn't starve or be thrown out. She couldn't bring herself to trade that security for something as frivolous as new cloth. Xerxes came to town on a cold Friday afternoon in late October. He carried more pelts than usual, his pack loaded heavy. When he came for his meal, Ophelia noticed he moved more stiffly than before. "Are you hurt?" she asked, setting down his plate. "Just a long hike. Nothing serious." But when he reached for his water glass, she saw the bandage on his left hand, blood seeping through the cloth. "That needs to be cleaned and rewrapped," she said firmly. "It's fine." "It's bleeding through. Let me help." She used the voice that had worked on her aunt when she was being stubborn about her medicine. He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "All right." She brought clean water and bandages, pulling a chair close to his table. When she unwrapped his hand, she found a deep gash across his palm, angry red at the edges. "This needs stitches," she said, concerned. "Had worse. I cleaned it with whiskey. Just needs to stay wrapped. It's going to scar badly if you don't let me stitch it properly. I help my mother with this kind of thing. I know what I'm doing." She looked up at him. "Please." The corner of his mouth quirked. "You're bossy when you want to be. Only when people are being foolish about their health." She was already threading a needle she had retrieved from Dorothy's sewing kit. He held his hand steady while she worked, not flinching even though she knew it had to hurt. His pain tolerance was remarkable. As she stitched, she was acutely aware of his size, of the warmth radiating from him, of the way he watched her face with intense focus. "How did this happen?" she asked, trying to distract them both from the intimacy of the moment. "Skinning knife slipped. My own carelessness." "You should be more careful." "Yes, madam." There was amusement in his voice. She tied off the final stitch and wrapped his hand with clean bandages. "There. Keep it dry and change the bandage daily. Come see me in a week so I can check it. I might not be back in town for a few weeks. Then you better take good care of it up there in your cabin." She met his eyes. "I mean it, Xerxes. If it gets infected, you could lose the hand." "I'll be careful. Promise." He flexed his fingers experimentally. "You did good work. Feels better already." "That's the whiskey talking, not my stitches." He laughed, an actual laugh that transformed his entire face. It was deep and rusty and wonderful, and it made something flutter in her chest. "You might be right about that," he admitted. After he ate, he lingered longer than usual, sipping coffee and watching the street through the window. Ophelia found excuses to stay in the dining room, wiping tables that were already clean, adjusting curtains that didn't need adjusting. "Winter's coming early this year," he said finally. "You can feel it in the air. Going to be a hard one. Will you be all right up in the mountains? I've survived 5 winters up there. Got everything I need. More worried about folks in town who aren't prepared." He paused. "You got warm enough clothes?" The question caught her off guard. "I have a shawl and my dress." "That all?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes, but I'll manage. I've been saving money. I can buy something if I need to." He frowned, that line between his brows deepening. "This isn't Kansas winter. Colorado mountain cold will go right through a thin shawl." "I said I'll manage," she replied, more sharply than she intended. She didn't need his pity. He raised his hands in surrender, then winced as the movement pulled at his stitches. "Didn't mean to offend, just concerned is all." Her irritation melted. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to people worrying about me." "Maybe you should get used to it." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before she could respond, Dorothy called from the kitchen, needing help with something, and the moment passed. Xerxes left shortly after, but not before catching Ophelia's eye and nodding, a gesture that felt like a promise of something undefined. 2 weeks later, November had settled in with cold winds and occasional snow flurries. Ophelia was hanging laundry in the backyard, her hands red and aching from the cold water, when she heard Dorothy call her name. "Ophelia, someone to see you!" She hurried inside, confused. No one ever came to see her. In the front parlor stood Xerxes, holding a large bundle wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "I made you something," he said without preamble. "Been working on it since I got back to the cabin. Figured you needed it more than I needed the pelts I used." She stared at the bundle, not understanding. "What is it?" "Open it and see." With trembling fingers, she untied the twine and pulled back the paper. Inside was the most beautiful coat she had ever seen. It was made from soft buckskin, lined with rabbit fur for warmth. The stitching was small and precise, showing hours of careful work. There were wooden buttons down the front, each one carved with a simple flower design. "You made this?" she whispered, running her hands over the smooth leather. "For me? You said you didn't have a warm coat. Now you do." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with her reaction. "I know it's not fancy like something from a store, but it'll keep you warm. I promise you that." Tears pricked her eyes. In her entire life, no one had ever made her anything. Everything she owned had been someone else's cast-offs. But this coat, this beautiful coat, had been made specifically for her, with her measurements in mind, designed to keep her warm and safe. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "This is the most wonderful gift I've ever received, the only new thing I've ever owned." His expression softened. "Try it on. Make sure it fits right." She slipped into the coat and it fit perfectly. The fur lining was soft against her neck, and the length fell to mid-thigh, protecting her legs. The weight of it felt secure, substantial. She had never owned anything so fine. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can't accept this. Those pelts, you could have traded them for supplies you need. I got plenty of supplies, and I wanted to make it for you." He met her eyes directly. Ophelia, I've been alone a long time. Thought that's what I wanted, what I needed. But these past few months, talking to you, seeing your face when I come to town, it's reminded me that being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. I've been lonely, even if I didn't want to admit it. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Xerxes, you don't have to say anything right now. I know I'm just a mountain man, and I live rough. But I wanted you to have something made just for you, something to show you that someone's thinking about you up there in those mountains. He cleared his throat. Also wanted you to be warm. That's important too. She laughed through her tears, touching the coat again just to prove it was real. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome. He looked like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded and turned to leave. Xerxes, wait. She caught his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. Will you stay for dinner, please? I'm making pot roast and there's plenty. His smile was slow but genuine. I'd like that. That evening, after the boarders had eaten and retreated to their rooms, Xerxes and Ophelia sat in the kitchen over coffee and the last of the pot roast. They talked about small things at first, safe topics like the weather and town gossip. But as the night deepened and the kitchen grew quiet around them, their conversation turned more personal. Tell me about your cabin, she said. What's it like up there? It's small, just one room, really. But I built it myself, and it's solid. Keeps the wind out, keeps the warmth in. I've got a good stove, a bed, a table and chair, everything I need. He paused. It's peaceful. You can hear the wind in the pines, see the stars at night like you wouldn't believe. Sometimes I'll sit on the porch and watch the sun come up over the peaks, and it feels like I'm the only person in the world. That sounds beautiful. It is, but it's also hard. Winters are long. Sometimes I don't see another soul for weeks at a time. That's when the quiet stops being peaceful and starts being heavy. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. After my family died, I thought I wanted that. Thought I deserved to be alone with my grief. But grief is a strange thing. It changes over time, becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. What were they like? Your wife and daughter? If you don't mind talking about them. He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, Sarah was kind. She laughed easy and loved hard. She could find joy in the smallest things, a bird singing, fresh bread, a sunny day. Our daughter Emma was only 4 when the fire happened. She had Sarah's laugh and my stubborn streak. She loved flowers and was always bringing me handfuls of dandelions like they were precious treasures. They sound wonderful. They were. I failed them. No, Ophelia said firmly, reaching across the table to grip his uninjured hand. A fire isn't your fault. Accidents happen. I wasn't there. I was in town trading pelts. If I had been home, maybe I could have gotten them out. His voice was rough with old pain. Or maybe you would have died too. Then there would be 3 graves instead of 2, and no one to remember them. She squeezed his hand. You survived, Xerxes. That's not a failure. That's what they would have wanted. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to lose people and feel like you should have done more. My mother was sick for months before she died. I tried everything, every remedy, every prayer. Nothing worked. For years I felt guilty that I couldn't save her, but eventually I realized that some things are beyond our control, and all we can do is keep living, keep trying, keep honoring their memory by being the best people we can be. That's wisdom, even if you don't recognize it. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. You're a remarkable woman, Ophelia Carson. I'm just a woman who cooks at a boarding house. You're more than that. You're strong and kind and brave. You walked across mountains with nothing and built yourself a new life. That takes courage. No one had ever called her brave before. The words settled into her chest, warm and affirming. They talked until the candles burned low, reluctant to let the evening end. When Xerxes finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Maybe we could have dinner again? I'd like that very much. Good. That's real good. He smiled, and she thought again how transformed his face became when he let himself show happiness. Wear the coat. Keep warm. I will, I promise. After he left, she went upstairs to the tiny room she shared with Mary and carefully hung the coat on a peg. In the candlelight, the leather glowed golden and the fur lining shimmered. She touched it gently, reverently. Her first new possession, made with care and thought and affection. It was more than a coat. It was a promise, a beginning, a doorway to possibility. November turned to December, and the coat became her constant companion. She wore it to hang laundry in the freezing mornings, to walk to the general store for supplies, to stand outside in the rare moments of free time and watch the snow fall on the mountains. It was the finest thing she had ever owned, and she treasured it. Xerxes came to town every 2 weeks, regular as clockwork. Each visit, he brought something new that he had made. A pair of leather gloves lined with soft fur, a knitted scarf in deep blue wool that he admitted sheepishly he had traded pelts for because he couldn't knit to save his life, a set of wooden hair combs carved with mountain flowers. "You don't have to keep making me things," she protested, though her heart sang with each gift. "I want to," he said simply. "I like making things for you. Besides, you never owned anything brand new before. Seems to me you deserve to have a few nice things." She began making things for him in return. A warm shirt from fabric she bought with her saved wages, stitching it carefully by candlelight. A thick wool blanket for his cabin, which took her 3 weeks of evening work to complete. Mittens made from an old sweater of Dorothy's that she unraveled and re-knitted. "You don't have to do this," he said when she gave him the blanket, but his eyes were bright with emotion. "I want to," she echoed his own words back at him. "You've given me so much. Let me give you something too." Their courtship unfolded slowly through the winter months, built on shared meals and quiet conversations, on the gradual building of trust between two people who had learned to be cautious with their hearts. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about learning to trap from his father, about meeting Sarah at a church social and knowing immediately she was the one. She told him about her mother's gentle nature, about her aunt's practical kindness, about the fear she had felt walking to Colorado with nothing but hope sustaining her. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said one evening in January, the words coming out rough and uncertain. They were sitting in the kitchen as had become their custom, the rest of the boarding house quiet around them. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again, wasn't sure I wanted to, but here we are, and I can't seem to help myself." Ophelia's breath caught. "I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for months, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid I was imagining things. You're not imagining anything." He stood and moved around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. His hands cupped her face with surprising tenderness for someone so large and rough. "I know I don't have much to offer, just a cabin in the mountains and a hard life. But I can promise you this, I will spend every day making sure you're safe and warm and loved. I'll make you whatever you need, provide for you the best I can. You'll never go hungry or cold or unloved again." "That's all I've ever wanted," she whispered. "Someone to love who loves me back, a home that's really mine, a life we build together." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the strength in his arms as they wrapped around her. It felt like coming home. "Marry me," he said against her hair. "Come live with me in the mountains. Let me spend the rest of my life taking care of you." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were wed in February of 1879 in the small church in Canon City, with Dorothy and her husband standing as witnesses. Ophelia wore a dress that Xerxes had commissioned from the seamstress in town, the first store-bought dress she had ever owned. It was simple but beautiful, made of soft blue wool that matched her eyes. Xerxes wore new clothes as well, though she could tell he was uncomfortable in anything other than his buckskins. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, and the reverence in his voice made her feel like the most precious woman in the world. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at the boarding house. Dorothy had made a cake, and several of the boarders attended, along with a few of the townspeople who had come to know and respect both of them. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was filled with warmth and genuine affection. That evening, Xerxes brought her to his cabin for the first time. The journey took several hours on horseback, winding up mountain trails as the sun set behind the peaks. Ophelia rode behind him on his sturdy mare, her arms wrapped around his waist, trusting him completely to get them safely home. When they finally arrived, she understood why he loved this place. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks glowing pink and gold in the last light. The air was so clear and cold it almost hurt to breathe, and the silence was profound. "Welcome home," he said, helping her down from the horse. Inside, the cabin was exactly as he had described. One large room with a stone fireplace, a bed covered in furs, a sturdy table and chairs. But she could see all the ways he had prepared for her arrival. Curtains hung at the windows, bright cloth against the rough logs. Shelves lined one wall, ready to hold dishes and supplies. A rocking chair sat near the fireplace, clearly new, made from bent wood and smoothed to a soft finish. "You made this," she said, running her hand over the chair. "Thought you might like a comfortable place to sit in the evenings. I can make more furniture as we need it. Whatever you want, I'll build it for you." She turned to him, overwhelmed with emotion. "You've already given me so much. And I'll keep giving you more. That's what love is, isn't it? Giving to each other, building a life together, making something better than what either of us could have alone." That night, in the warmth of furs and firelight, they truly became husband and wife. Xerxes was gentle and patient, attentive to her needs and her nervousness. He made her feel cherished and desired, beautiful and strong. Afterward, she lay against his chest listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years. "I never thought I'd be this happy again," he murmured into her hair. "Neither did I," she admitted, "but here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, "and I'm going to make sure it stays this way. You're going to have everything you need, everything you deserve. I promise you that." Life in the mountain cabin was hard work, but deeply satisfying. Ophelia learned to maintain the small vegetable garden Xerxes had started, to preserve food for the long winters, to help with skinning and preparing the pelts he trapped. He taught her to shoot a rifle, insisting she know how to protect herself when he was away checking his trap lines. "I won't always be here," he explained. "Sometimes I have to be gone for a few days. I need to know you can take care of yourself." She proved to be a good student, and he was a patient teacher. More than that, he involved her in every aspect of their life. When he built a larger storage shed that summer, he showed her how to notch logs and secure them properly. When he tanned leather for new clothes, he taught her the process so she could help. Everything he knew, he shared with her freely. And he kept his promise about making her things. A beautiful pine dresser with 3 drawers for her clothes, a mirror with a carved frame depicting mountain flowers, a butter churn, a spinning wheel for wool, a loom so she could weave cloth. Every item was crafted with care and skill, made specifically for her needs and preferences. "How do you know how to make all these things?" she asked one evening, watching him carve wooden spoons at the table. "My father was a carpenter, taught me everything he knew before he died. Said a man who could work with his hands would never go hungry." He tested the curve of the spoon against his palm. "I'm glad he was right. Means I can give you what you need." "You've given me more than things," she said softly. "You've given me a home, a purpose, a life full of love. That's worth more than anything you could build." He set down the spoon and pulled her into his lap, wrapping his strong arms around her. "You've given me the same. I was just existing up here before you came. Now I'm living again. You brought light back into my life, Ophelia. You made me remember what it feels like to be happy." She kissed him deeply, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. They made love there at the table, then again later in their bed, the fire crackling and the wind singing in the pines outside. Autumn came again, and Ophelia realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never been a mother before, didn't know if she would be any good at it, but Xerxes was thrilled when she told him, his face lighting up with a happiness she had never seen before. "We're going to have a baby?" He placed his large hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A real baby?" "Yes, probably around April, I think." He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly with a tenderness that made her throat tight. "I never thought I'd get this chance again. After Emma, I thought that part of my life was over. But here we are, starting again, building something new." "Are you happy about it?" she asked, running her fingers through his long hair. "Happy doesn't even come close. I'm grateful and excited and terrified all at once." He looked up at her. "I won't let anything happen to you or this baby. I swear it." "I know," she said, believing him completely. As her pregnancy progressed through the fall and winter, Xerxes became even more devoted to her care. He made sure she had the best food, the warmest clothes, the most comfortable place to sit. He built a cradle from smooth pine, carving it with such delicate details that it looked like a work of art. Tiny animals marched around the sides, deer and rabbits and birds, all watching over where their child would sleep. "It's beautiful," she said, tears streaming down her face. Pregnancy had made her emotions even closer to the surface. "Our baby is so lucky to have you as a father." "I'm the lucky one," he insisted. "You've given me a second chance at everything I thought I'd lost. A wife, a family, a reason to believe the future can be good." When her time came in late April of 1880, they were ready. Xerxes had brought her down to Canon City 2 weeks earlier, not wanting to risk her giving birth in the mountains without help. They stayed at the boarding house, Dorothy fussing over Ophelia like a mother hen. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Xerxes refused to leave her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she was too exhausted to respond. When their son finally arrived, screaming his displeasure at being born, Ophelia looked at Xerxes and saw tears streaming down his face. "A boy," he said in wonder, taking the baby from the midwife with surprising confidence. "We have a son." They named him Samuel, after Xerxes' father. He was a healthy baby with a full head of dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. Xerxes held him constantly those first few days, as if afraid he might disappear if he put him down. "I was so scared," he admitted one night when Samuel was sleeping between them. "Scared I'd lose you both, scared I'd fail again. But you were so strong, and he's so perfect. We did this, Ophelia. We made this beautiful life." "We did," she agreed, watching him trace gentle fingers over their son's tiny features. "And we're going to give him the best life we possibly can." They returned to the cabin when Ophelia was strong enough to travel. Xerxes had modified one of his pack horses to create a comfortable seat for her and the baby, making sure they were secure and warm. The journey took twice as long as usual because he insisted on frequent stops to let her rest. Life with a baby was exhausting but wonderful. Ophelia had never known she could love someone so fiercely, so completely. Every sound Samuel made, every expression that crossed his tiny face, felt like a miracle. And watching Xerxes as a father filled her heart to bursting. He was patient and gentle, singing old songs in his deep voice to soothe the baby, walking the floor at night when Samuel was fussy so Ophelia could sleep. "You're a natural at this," she told him one morning, watching him change Samuel's diaper with practiced ease. "I had practice with Emma. Glad I remembered how." He finished fastening the cloth and lifted Samuel up, making the baby gurgle with delight. "Besides, how could I not be good at this when I have such a perfect son?" As Samuel grew from infant to baby to toddler, Xerxes continued making things for their family. A high chair so Samuel could eat at the table with them, wooden toys, blocks and animals, and a little wagon. A small bed for when he outgrew the cradle, carved with the same care as everything else Xerxes created. "You're going to spoil him," Ophelia said, but she was smiling. "Good. A child should be spoiled with love and attention, makes them feel secure." He was working on a rocking horse, sanding the wood to silky smoothness. "Besides, I like making things, especially for the people I love." Their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Xerxes still ran his trap lines and hunted, but he was never gone for more than a day or two at a time. Ophelia managed the household, tended the garden, cared for Samuel. They worked together to maintain their home, to build the life they both wanted. In the summer of 1882, Ophelia realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news felt more settled, less frightening. They knew what to expect, knew they could handle it. "Another baby," Xerxes said, pulling her close. "Our family keeps growing. Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible. You've given me everything, Ophelia. A home filled with love, children to raise, a purpose beyond just surviving. You saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with food and shelter." Their daughter was born in February of 1883, another difficult birth but worth every moment of pain. They named her Grace, and she had Ophelia's delicate features and light hair. Samuel, now almost 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. "Gentle," Xerxes reminded him constantly as Samuel tried to pet Grace's soft hair. She's little. We have to be very gentle with her." "I'm gentle, Papa," Samuel insisted, proving it by softly touching her tiny hand. Watching Xerxes with both children, seeing how he balanced strength and tenderness, confirmed everything Ophelia had known from the beginning. This man who had seemed so rough and isolated when she first met him had more capacity for love than anyone she had ever known. He had taken his grief and transformed it into something beautiful, had learned from his loss, and used it to become a better person. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Xerxes built an addition onto the cabin, giving them more space as the children grew. He made Samuel a small bow and taught him to shoot, instilling respect for nature and hunting along with the skill. He carved Grace a dollhouse with tiny furniture, spending months on the intricate details to make it perfect. Every item in their home had a story, had been created by Xerxes' skilled hands. The plates they ate from, carved from wood and sanded smooth. The blankets on their beds, woven by Ophelia on the loom he had built. The chairs they sat in, the shelves that held their supplies, the door that kept out the cold. Nothing was bought from stores except what absolutely had to be, fabric and coffee and sugar and salt. Everything else came from their work, their land, their love. "Do you ever miss town life?" Xerxes asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing in the clearing, Samuel pushing Grace on a swing he had hung from a sturdy pine branch. "No," Ophelia said honestly. "Everything I need is right here. You, our children, our home. This is where I belong." "I feel the same way, though sometimes I think about Samuel and Grace getting older. They'll need more education than we can give them. Might need to consider sending them to school in Canon City, at least for part of the year. We have time to figure that out. They're still young." She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Whatever we decide, we'll decide together." "Together," he agreed, wrapping his arm around her. "Always together." When Samuel turned 8, they made the difficult decision to send him to Canon City during the school year, boarding with Dorothy and attending the local school. It broke Ophelia's heart to be separated from her son, but she knew it was necessary. He needed education, needed to learn to read and write and do mathematics properly. "I'll miss you so much," she told him, helping him pack his things. "I'll miss you too, Mama, but Papa says I can come home every few weeks and for the whole summer." Samuel tried to be brave, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "You're going to do wonderfully," Xerxes assured him. "You're strong and smart, just like your mother. Mrs. Brennan will take good care of you, and you'll make friends. Before you know it, summer will be here, and you'll be back home." They made the journey to Canon City together, settling Samuel with Dorothy, who was delighted to have him. The boarding house had fewer boarders now, and she appreciated the company. Leaving him was one of the hardest things Ophelia had ever done, but she knew it was right. Grace would follow the same path when she turned 8, spending school years in town and summers in the mountains. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution they could find. The years continued their steady march. Samuel grew tall and strong like his father, developing the same quiet competence and gentle strength. Grace became a skilled seamstress and cook, learning everything Ophelia could teach her. Both children thrived despite the unusual arrangement, comfortable in both the mountain cabin and town life. "You did good," Xerxes told Ophelia one evening when Samuel was 14 and Grace was 11. "Our children are turning out well." "We did good," she corrected. "This was both of us, every step of the way." He smiled and pulled her close. They were older now, gray threading through both their hair. His hands showed the wear of decades of hard work, and her face had lines from years of mountain sun and smiling. But their love had only deepened with time, growing richer and more complex. "Do you remember the first time I came to the boarding house?" he asked. "When you served me stew and cornbread?" "Of course. You were so quiet, so closed off. I wondered what your story was." "I wondered about yours too. You had these sad eyes, but there was strength in them. Determination. I think I started falling for you that very first day, even though I wouldn't admit it to myself for months. I was fascinated by you, this huge mountain man who moved so carefully, who was so gentle despite his size. I wanted to know everything about you. And now you do." You know all my secrets, all my fears, all my dreams. He kissed her temple. You've been my partner in everything, Ophelia. The best decision I ever made was making you that coat, she laughed. The coat that changed everything. It wasn't just the coat, it was what the coat represented. Me finally being brave enough to admit I wanted more than solitude. Me taking a chance on love again. You taking a chance on a broken mountain man who had nothing to offer but his hands and his heart. Your hands and your heart were more than enough. They were everything. In 1891, when Samuel was 21, he brought home a young woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Catherine, and she was the daughter of the schoolteacher in Canon City. She was practical and kind, and she looked at Samuel the way Ophelia looked at Xerxes, with love and admiration. She wants to live in the mountains, Samuel told them nervously. I told her how hard it is, but she says she's not afraid of hard work. Then she's perfect for you, Xerxes said, clapping his son on the shoulder. We'll help you build your own cabin, start your own life. The land next to ours would be perfect. They spent the summer building Samuel and Catherine's cabin, working together as a family. Xerxes taught Samuel the same skills his father had taught him, showing him how to notch logs properly, how to make a cabin that would withstand mountain winters. Grace helped Catherine learn to cook on a wood stove, to preserve food, to handle the practical realities of mountain living. At the wedding, held in the clearing between the two cabins with the peaks as witness, Ophelia watched her son promise his life to Catherine and felt her heart might burst with pride and joy. This was what family looked like. This was what love built, something that extended beyond just two people to create a legacy. Grace married 2 years later, choosing a young doctor who agreed to practice in Canon City so Grace could be close to both town and mountains. Their wedding was held in the church, a more formal affair, but no less filled with love. Our children are settled, Ophelia said to Xerxes after Grace's wedding. They were back in their cabin, just the two of them again for the first time in years. They have good partners, good lives ahead of them. We did well by them, Xerxes agreed. Gave them love and security, taught them to work hard and treat people right. That's all parents can do, really. Now what do? He pulled her close, his arms still strong despite the years. Now we enjoy the quiet, spoil the grandchildren when they come, keep building this life we've created. I'm not done making things for you yet, Mrs. Sullivan. What else could I possibly need? I'll think of something. I always do. And he was right. Over the following years, he continued to create beautiful things for her. A new rocking chair when the first one wore out, even more comfortable than the original. A grandfather clock that he spent 2 years building, its steady tick becoming the heartbeat of their home. A jewelry box carved with incredible detail, every surface covered with flowers and vines. You never owned anything brand new when we met, he said, presenting her with the jewelry box on their 20th wedding anniversary. Now, everything you own was made just for you, with love. That's how it should be. She opened the box to find inside a necklace he had made from silver he had traded for, with a pendant shaped like a mountain peak. It's beautiful. Everything you've ever made me has been beautiful. Not as beautiful as you, not as beautiful as the life we've built together. Their grandchildren came, first Samuel and Catherine's daughter, then their son, then Grace and her husband's 3 children. The clearing between the cabins filled with the sound of children's laughter during summer visits. Xerxes made toys for each of them, rocking horses and dollhouses and wooden trains. He was endlessly patient with their questions and their energy, teaching them the same skills he had taught Samuel and Grace. You're in your element, Ophelia observed, watching him help the oldest grandson learn to whittle. I love it, having family around, watching them grow, passing on what I know. This is what life is supposed to be. He looked at her, his eyes still that same storm cloud blue. And I get to share it all with you. I'm the luckiest man who ever lived. Time continued its steady march. They grew older together, their hair turning white, their bodies moving more slowly. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by decades of shared experience and unwavering partnership. On their 30th anniversary, Xerxes presented her with his final major project. He had spent months working on it in secret, hiding it in Samuel's cabin. It was a cedar chest, large and beautifully crafted, with their initials carved into the lid, surrounded by a wreath of mountain flowers. Inside, he had placed everything from their life together: the paper that had wrapped her first coat, the first spoon he had carved, a lock of Samuel's baby hair and one from Grace, sketches he had made of her over the years, letters she had written him during the winter he had badly injured his leg and couldn't travel to town. "It's our story," he said. "Everything that matters, everything that made us who we are. I wanted it all in one place, preserved for our children and grandchildren. So they'll always know how much we loved each other, how we built this life from nothing but determination and affection." She was crying too hard to speak, so she just held him, feeling the solid reality of him, the man who had taken a broken woman with nothing and given her everything. The man who had crafted not just objects but an entire life, who had made her feel cherished and valued every single day. "I love you," she finally managed. "I have loved you from the moment you gave me that coat, and I will love you until my last breath." "And beyond that," he said. "Love doesn't end with death. I know that now. What we have, what we've built, it's eternal." They lived in their mountain cabin until they were both too old to manage it alone. Samuel and Catherine moved them into the cabin next door, taking over the main house so they could care for Ophelia and Xerxes properly. It was a natural transition, the circle completing itself. Xerxes died in his sleep in the winter of 1904, his hand clasped in Ophelia's, just as it had been for the past 25 years. He was 73 years old and had lived a full, rich life. His children and grandchildren gathered to mourn him, to celebrate the man he had been, the legacy he had left. He made everything around us," Samuel said at the funeral, gesturing at the cabin, the furniture, the life they all lived. "But more than that, he made us who we are. He taught us to work with our hands, to love with our whole hearts, to build something lasting. That's what he gave us." Ophelia lived for 3 more years, surrounded by family and love. She spent her days in the rocking chair Xerxes had made, wrapped in the quilt she had woven on the loom he had built. Every object in her life was a reminder of him, of his love, of the life they had created together. When she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1907, at 75 years old, her children buried her next to Xerxes in the small cemetery they had established on the mountain. The grandchildren placed wildflowers on both graves, mountain blooms that would return every spring. The cedar chest remained in the family, passed down through generations. Each new generation would open it and hear the story of the mountain man who made everything with love, and the woman who had never owned anything brand new until he came into her life. They would touch the carved wood, read the faded letters, look at the sketches, and understand what real love looked like. It looked like a coat made from carefully tanned leather and soft fur. It looked like wooden spoons and carved chairs and countless hours of patient work. It looked like building a cabin, raising children, facing hardships together with unwavering support. It looked like 2 people who had both known loss finding each other and choosing to build something beautiful from their shared pain. The cabin still stood a century later, preserved by descendants who understood its importance. The furniture Xerxes had made remained sturdy and beautiful, testament to his skill and devotion. Visitors could see the rocking chair, the grandfather clock, the cradle that had held both Samuel and Grace. They could walk through rooms where love had been the foundation of everything, where a man and woman had created a life from nothing but determination and affection. And they could understand, looking at all that Xerxes Sullivan had made with his own 2 hands, that the greatest thing he had ever created wasn't furniture or tools or even the cabin itself. It was the family he and Ophelia had built together, the legacy of love that continued long after both of them were gone. That was the true masterpiece, the one that would last forever. The story of the woman who had never owned anything brand new, and the mountain man who made everything for her from scratch with love, became a legend in Canon City. Parents told it to their children as an example of true devotion. Young couples visited the preserved cabin, hoping some of that enduring love might touch their own relationships. The cedar chest was displayed in a place of honor, its contents carefully preserved so that future generations could see the physical evidence of a love that had shaped an entire family tree. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the things themselves, but what they represented. Every carved chair, every woven blanket, every carefully crafted toy was a physical manifestation of love. They were proof that someone had cared enough to spend their time, their energy, their skill, creating something beautiful for another person. They were evidence that love wasn't just words or feelings, but actions taken day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Xerxes had promised Ophelia that she would never go hungry or cold or unloved again, and he had kept that promise every single day of their life together. He had built her a home, given her a family, surrounded her with beauty and care. And she had done the same for him, had brought light back into his life, had given him the courage to love again after devastating loss. Together, they had proven that it was possible to start over, to build something good from ruins, to choose hope over despair. They had shown that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about the steady accumulation of small acts of devotion that added up to a life well lived. And that legacy, that understanding of what love truly meant, was the greatest gift they had left behind. It lived on in their descendants, in the stories that were told about them, in the physical objects they had created that still existed generations later. The mountain man and the woman with nothing had built an empire of love, and it would endure as long as people remembered their story and understood the truth at its heart. True love was patient and practical and enduring. It made coats to keep you warm and furniture to make you comfortable and memories to sustain you through hard times. It built cabins and raised children and faced each day with determination and grace. It was Xerxes carving by firelight, Ophelia cooking at the stove, two people working side by side to create something neither could have achieved alone. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the love story that would be told forever, a reminder that the best things in life were made by hand, with patience and skill and devotion, given freely to those we cherished most.